Okay, I'm fine with the recording, no problem here. Why are we talking about a specific convention, and why do we need to strengthen the human rights of older persons? As you all know, the number of older persons is increasing, and it's doubled between 2019 to 2050 globally. And I think this globally is something we also need to stress in our conversation. So we are not only speaking about the Western and Northern world, we are speaking about a global increase of older persons which cannot enjoy their human rights fully. And what we also saw in the last 10 years, and even more to be honest, that older persons are invisible in the human rights framework. Why is it that older persons are invisible? Because we have other dedicated groups which are in the focus. And we also need to have a dedicated human rights instrument on the human rights of older persons, because otherwise there is no specific focus in the human rights framework. So what we also saw, for example, with the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, they fought for it, they shouted for it, and they argued very hard. And in the end, they got the convention, which includes the specific needs and the specific asks of people with disabilities. And what we also saw during the system is that the narrative changed. So what we also want to achieve is a change from to see older persons also as rights holders, as persons with disabilities, in a way to give them a leading role for their own rights. And this is why I always argue we need the Human Rights Convention on the rights of older persons, because this would give visibility, this would give leadership, and this would give guidance to member states and show them quite clearly how to implement the human rights, taking into account the specific asks and needs of older persons. Why did the human rights world introduce the mandate of the independent expert? They thought there should be one person in the whole UN system who takes care of the rights of older persons. And this was why the mandate was established in 2014. So what we see right now, or what you see with me, is that there is one person for millions of older persons globally who tries to bring to the audience, to member states, to civil society and other key stakeholders, the gaps in the human rights framework, to promote and to address also those rights, and to discuss with member states how to address the gaps and the challenges to realize the human rights of older persons, because this is really needed. And this is why the mandate was introduced with a Human Rights Council resolution. I'm part of the special procedures in which is based, they are based in Geneva under the framework of the Office of the High Commissioner of Human Rights. I'm tasked to do 2 country missions per year, and as Cynthia mentioned, I started my term during the COVID crisis, so I was not allowed to travel for the first 1.5 years. So I have a kind of a backlog, which I will never change because we are not allowed to use the budget in the next year. Another thing is I'm tasked to 2 thematic reports per year. One goes to the Human Rights Council and the other goes to the General Assembly, the 3rd Committee. And this will be one of my next procedural steps, which when I also have the chance to go to New York again in September, October. It's not scheduled yet, but I will introduce one of my reports, and this report will focus on the climate change related disasters and the response, taking into account the specificities of the human rights of older persons. What else is that's the mandate? We are also able to get communications from individuals, and we can also write comments on legislation and policies to member states and then have a dialogue with them. If you're interested, you can always go back to my homepage where you see my annual reports. I started with the impact of the coronavirus disease on the enjoyment of all human rights by older persons. Then I was thinking it would be good to address ageism and age discrimination. This was my second report. And I'm always interested in intersectionalities. So I focused on the human rights of older women and the intersection between aging and gender. And because I mainly addressed economic, social, and cultural rights, I was also thinking to bring to the attention to member states that also civil and political rights needs to be addressed. And this is why I did a report on older persons deprived of their liberty, which does not only take into account what is happening in prisons, but also what kind of deprivation of liberty can happen in the situation of care. And one of my reports, because I would say one of the current crises also is adequate housing for everybody, is older persons and the right to adequate housing. My next report to the Human Rights Council will tackle the issue of violence, abuse, and neglect of older persons, and I will launch it in September at the Human Rights Council. I'm also tasked to be part of the open-ended working group on aging to address member states and be part of the discussion. So I'm regularly invited to speak at the beginning of the open-ended working group to address member states and other key stakeholders with my specific views, because it's, I would say it's not really something new that I'm telling everybody, that from my perspective, the best and the highest protection of the human rights of older person is a dedicated human rights instrument, a human rights convention on the rights of older persons. And not all member states agree. And I think this is also part of the discussion. So now we discussed for more than 10 years, more than a decade, all the different topics. And I think we have a lot of paper and also a lot of good paper where we address the gaps and also how to close them.
I think we're frozen, Claudia. We're not hearing you. Did we lose your audio? Huh. I think our guest Claudia Mahler has had to leave. She'll probably come back on in just a moment. So while she's doing that, I urge you to go to the chat, which is under the participants list. You can pose any questions you would like to ask when hopefully she'll get back on in just a moment. Unstableness of the internet today. Let's see.
Until she does someone want to share their impressions? Cynthia, perhaps you do, or anyone else who is there.
At the open-ended working group. Well,
Yes.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I will say the most I that I heard this year more than ever, I heard the vocal voices of civil society. And so we were not quiet. When we heard things, whether it be on the floor from member states or among ourselves with uh, comments made, we clapped, we applauded loudly. And I think we really were very much heard. And I've just readmitted Claudia. So I think our voices have been getting stronger, and we're certainly heard at the open-ended working group.
Hello again. I don't know
Right.
what
Yep.
happened. I'm back. I'm very sorry for this technical issue.
No problem. I talked on. Well, I knew that you had
So
frozen.
where are we now? So where are we now? So then I just, jump into the conversation.
Nope,
As I said before, I talked a little bit about the decade that we discussed all the different topics, and that I'm in favor of a convention, and that we also had the chance to include the update analytical paper, which was written by Andrew Burns. And that last year at the 12th session, 2022, we stopped with the decision to have a core group, a smaller group, which should work on the specificities and come up with a decision to work also between the sessions. This sounds very technically, but if you see that we have the chance only to meet once a year for a couple of days, you can also understand why it's really critical that member states not only come for these 4 days and work there, not very well prepared, and then stop, but also to work during the session on the specificities, how we can close these gaps and what kind of gaps are there. Because it's not only that we are only have the chance to work only in these 4 days, but also many of the technical stuff are changing. So very often we have people which are not that well informed in the loop and need to address them again. So from my perspective, it is really critical that also member states have a chance. Could somebody who's in the room also mute himself? I hear a little bit of background noise. Thank you. So, as I said, it is critical for all of us to move forward, that member states also have a chance to work between the sessions. So this core group came up with a decision this year, and thanks to Chile, which is chairing the group of friends in New York, they managed to come up with the decision that there will be 2 co-facilitators, which will work during the session and come up with a specific outcome for next year, where they are addressing the current gaps in the human rights framework. As I said before, we have tons of paper addressing the gaps and showing why and where the gaps are, but because this is a political driven process, member states need to agree that there are gaps, and if they have agreed on the gaps, they can go to the next step and close them. So hopefully what we see next year is that they manage to compile all the gaps and also already come up with very good solutions how to close them. And this is what we hopefully get next year. The co-facilitators are Portugal from the Western world and Brazil from the Southern world, I would say. And I think it's a very good choice because Portugal is also part of the European Union, very dedicated to the whole topic and pretty much involved. They have already been part of the bureau of the open-ended working group, so they know the process quite well. And with Brazil, We also got a very good partner from the South with a powerful commitment, and I'm sure that they will work together quite well to bring a very good solution to the table next year. So why is this so important, and why are civil society so important? As I said, member states regularly work on this issue for a week and maybe a couple of, preparation meetings, but that's it. And you are all the experts. So if you manage to get involved in the conversation with these co-facilitators, or give them a kind of, space to get better informed, I guess this is very much welcomed from the co-facilitators. It is a hard work to come up with this specific proposal in a year. As you remember, we are already discussing things for more than a decade. So now they only have 11 months to come up with a good solution. So for them, it's really critical to get the right information in a very easy, understandable way, to have discussion with other member states to get them on board. So what I will try to do to reach out to them and support their work, and I think the same could be done on the national level. If you're reaching out to your governments, get them informed what is needed to be done, and give them also a helping hand. How is the process? What are the next steps? What has been discussed already? So people are informed and can give advice. I think this is what we need now for the next couple of months. I stop here, and if you have any questions, let me know. There are many people in the room who also attended the open-ended working group for many years, so they are also fully informed about the process. And I think what we really need now is action on the national level and cooperation between all the different key stakeholders. Thank you for your attention, and I'm also very grateful for your support for the mandate and all your contributions to my report and the different things I do. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'll take over as a moderator, but thank you for your hard work and for the progress that was made to you, Claudia, and others who attended. I think sounds like we're moving forward. So we have a couple of questions. I was always curious because this mandate was 10 years ago. And do you feel, I'll kick it off, do you feel that this year was a breakthrough? How would you describe the flow of this, the change of the member states? Give us the big picture before we dive into the smaller questions.
I think there were always small steps of progress. If you remember, a couple of years ago, they changed the process of consideration and the practice of cooperation during the open-ended working group. So they specifically said we are focusing now on 2 topics per year, and also discuss the normative elements of last year. So this was, from my perspective, already some small progress. Then we had Austria and Germany, who asked openly for the renewal of the paper of the Office of the High Commissioner to get this analytical update paper. This was, from my perspective, the next step. But we also had some, negative approaches. As you might also remember, Argentina, the chair, asked for a decision, to take a decision each session, to have agreed language in the end. They failed all the time. So from my perspective, what we saw this year is that member states took up the decision, and it went through. So this is an agreed outcome. So from my perspective, yes, it is still a baby step, but it's a huge baby step in the right direction. We get the 2 co-facilitators, and we also still do have the core group in the back. I'm not sure how active they will be. I didn't hear much about them. So the co-facilitators are now the ones with the huge task to bring us a solution for next year. And then I think next year will be very critical. If we see that the co-facilitators are coming up with the identified gaps, and hopefully their solution goes in the right direction, we need to support their decision, or we need to support their proposal. But we also need to make sure that their idea how to close the gaps goes into the right direction, because we don't want to hear again better implementation would do the trick. We know now for a decade that the better implementation did not do the trick, and nothing really changed. So yes, thank you, Sandra, for the question. And I think it is a game changer, but we are not quite sure how fast we will move on. Let me say it like this. Thanks, Elaine.
Thanks, Claudia. Before I take questions, and I see one from Jack, and also I wanted to call on Amara, I just wondered, Margaret, Margaret Young, who is chair of GARUP, if you have any insights or comments, because you were so deeply involved.
Thank you, Sandra, for the opportunity to share. I think first, just going back to the question about OEWG and what's different that was observed, in addition to what Cynthia said, I think the partnership between NGOs and NHRIs were very evident. We were all together creating those key messages during the morning debrief. And because we created those key messages together, I think it was helpful and influential in terms of the final decision to adopt. That we weren't the only ones, because the core group worked really, really hard with the fellow member states. But I think, key takeaways for me from that experience is us NGOs need to come together stronger with different actors. Like we had new members who never showed up at OEWG coming on board, and it was a great pleasure to meet them and help them to make the interventions. So I think more actors from us, NGOs. Second, NHRIs, NGOs working together more, be it nationally or regionally. And then third, older people. Like we had some older activists that we sponsored. And in one individual shared her dementia experience as she's getting older and what that would be like, and how CDRP is just not enough. And I think that resonated a lot with I think the audience. So I think older people voices amongst all this need to happen. And I agree with Claudia a lot in terms of this coming intercessional work. I think as a group, we need to be more strategic in terms of how we help the co-facilitators to achieve the task, but also we need to kind of think about what we want to, and maybe we could influence within that. And I think I and my, all the GARUP members would look forward to more conversations on this and welcome any suggestions and inputs together. Thank you.
Thanks. We have a few questions from Amara Francis, and some of them have been answered. I wonder if you want to break down your questions and ask one or two. Amara, are you there? I see your name.
Thank you. I'm here. Sorry, I'm in a rowdy place, so I may not be able to put on my video, but I trust you can hear me.
Yes. I wonder if we have lost you. Have we lost you?
Great. Margaret just throw some light. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think Margaret just threw some light into my concern.
Amara, you are breaking up. I don't know about your audio.
Which platform do we have where the input from the CSOs are being heard?
Did you hear that question, Claudia?
Okay,
Yes.
maybe it's
Yes,
it's my
I got it and I read it
contribution of
in the,
CSOs.
I got it and I read it in the chat also. Thank you, Amara, for the question.
Thank you.
From what I know till now is that there is no platform yet because the co-facilitators are just were announced, and I think they don't have any roadmap yet. So we will see what kind of exchange mechanism they want to install.
Okay, thanks for that. And then Jack Kupferman, I see your hand up. Do you have a question?
Yes. I'm curious to know who is the primary person, meaning individual, who's the link between civil society, DESA, and the co-facilitators? Who is that individual?
There is no individual because, as I said, there is no real roadmap. You know, we know who the co-facilitators are. I know that a couple of people reached out to Portugal and Brazil, but there is no real focal point yet. And I think this is what the question goes, or what you want to inquire. I understood that you want to know who's the focal point between civil society organizations and the co-facilitators, and there is none yet. So we are still waiting for the co-facilitators to tell us, or to tell CSO, NHRIs, and also myself, how to really get in contact with them. Sure, I know who the ambassadors are, and I will reach out to them. But because, as I said, you know, they were just announced. I think they just need to find their own ways, and hopefully they will reach out to us in the next week, hopefully not weeks.
Is it, do you have specific individuals in either one of those countries in their foreign ministry that you would think would be appropriate to be the focal point? The reason that
I think those of the mission who have been engaged as technical staff in the open-ended working group on aging. I think you know them also. I don't know, I only know the first names, not the last names, but maybe Erica can give us the last name too. So it might be Stefano, who presented Portugal in the bureau, and Pedro, which I also don't know the last name, from the mission of Brazil, who was also in the room all the time during the open-ended working group on aging. But in this regard, I will give the floor to Erica, who spoke with them.
Thank you, Claudia. I think Jack's question is, will the co-facilitators reach out to individuals in country, i.e. Brazil and Portugal, if I understood his question? As we all know, Brazil, Alex Kalach, who is a key player for us in CSOs. He's been with us for decades, and he's an advisor to the Minister on Aging for Brazil. So that's an obvious, the mission here would obviously work with Alex as the advisor and Alejandro, who is the minister. With Portugal, I mean, they already have, as Claudia mentioned, there are CSOs who've been working on this for decades. Age Platform Europe, and, you know, the UNECE meeting in Lisbon, Portugal played a really big role. So we are confident that the countries who are serving as co-facilitators have boots on the ground that they would reach out to. So I hope that answers your question.
Margaret, you had your hand up.
Yes, yeah, I was just going to share that, you know, with the news about the adoption of the informal decision. So we were quite excited at GARUP. What we did was we actually wrote a letter to Ambassador Squef to congratulate her and the regional core group on adopting the consensus, because that's quite a even though a small but big step from our point of view, as Claudia said. And we offer within that process that if GARUP can support, we would be happy to do that. Like, so just like how we support that process as we do with the OEWG different processes. So it was really, I think we sent it only last week, so we haven't heard, but our hope is that whatever we hear back, that we engage all of you and all the GARUP members to figure out what that needs to look like. It doesn't mean that we support that, but we need to figure out how that might look like in a coordinated way that can support everybody. Thank you.
Thanks. Francis, you have a suggestion, and I thought you might want to just discuss that in person. It's in the chat. Francis Zinedine, are you on?
Yes, she is.
Yes. Now, of course, everybody is attending this meeting because they recognize that the NGO Committee on Aging in New York has some responsibility and has done years and years of work related to the convention, as has GARUP, the Global Alliance. So first of all, for individuals who do not belong to any organization in their home country, I would suggest that you join an organization and through that organization become members of the 3 NGO committees, one in Geneva, one in New York, and one in Vienna, as well as becoming members of GARUP, the Global Alliance, of which Margaret Young is the chair. The chair of the open-ended working group has actually sent the official announcement of the co-facilitators to the heads of all those organizations. So that's the first contact point. And we are hoping and we believe that much of what will take place in the coming year will be transmitted to us, meaning the 3 NGO committees that I have mentioned, as well as to GARUP, plus the national human rights institutions. I don't think there's any one person who's going to be the key person to facilitate participation of civil society. It will be done usually through groups because member states would not be contacting individuals or individual organizations, but through representative organizations. So I think for those of you who have been following this and who want to be involved, that would be my suggestion, to join the organizations that I've mentioned. We have stressed the need for civil society, national human rights institutions, and of course the independent expert to be fully involved, to participate, and to be given opportunities to speak up at these intersessional informal intergovernmental meetings that will take place. As Claudia has mentioned, the appointment of the 2 co-facilitators has just happened a week or so ago, and the ambassadors have not met as yet. And so they will have to meet to discuss the way forward. And in the meantime, some of us have already, through the good offices of Bethany Brown, who had contacts through her work with the persons with disabilities, a few of us have met with Portugal and Brazil just yesterday to stress the need to comply with the request in the decision that the co-facilitators need to cooperate with NGOs, national human rights institutions, specialized agencies. There's a whole list. For the time being, as Claudia has mentioned, we have to wait until the ambassadors have met and until their discussions on the way forward. And we believe that the information will be transmitted to us through the organizations that I've just mentioned. Thank you.
I see a question from Guruji Dr. Murugan Chalaya of Malaysia, and perhaps it's premature to ask that question. He says, is there any portal, platform, or system which can allocate appropriate focal points for respective countries to ease or allow smooth communication or tackle any issues for such country NGOs and members? Claudia.
As I said before, there's nothing set up now because it's also brand new, and also, you know, Francis elaborated on this. And I think we also need to acknowledge that because the NGO committee in New York is really nearby, you have the best chances to get involved, and then also to spread the word how to get others into the loop. For NHRites, it's a little bit more critical because they don't have an office in New York, so it might be much harder for them to get involved in these kind of workshops or, you know, whatever it is then in the end. But we hope that they find ways to announce how civil society organizations and NHRites can get involved and to provide support, as Margaret also mentioned, support for the co-facilitators to, be present and be heard during these conversations.
Yeah, this individual is from Malaysia, so you know, that is probably a suggestion of some type. And if you wish to speak, Guruji Dr. Murugan Chalaya, you're certainly welcome to elaborate on your needs or your desires to have a focal point. Are you with us?
But what would help always is to get back to your national government and ask them about their position. You know, if Malaysia is interested in supporting the human rights of all the persons, if they want to get involved there, and if they're positive in regard of a human rights convention. So you can also inquire and inform them, because they might not be aware on about the process of the open-ended working group on aging. Sometimes there is a disconnect between capital and New York. So if you can bridge this and bring the current situation to their attention, I guess this would already be a very good move to get them involved and also to get you involved, because then government might reach out to the co-facilitators and support them and get more information. So this would, I would hope so, that it would trickle down to you again, so you can also get involved in the end on the national level. So thank you for your question.
Yeah, it seems to me, you know, these are things that will be happening in the next few months, and open-ended working group on aging didn't end so long ago. So I look at these as aspirational, hopeful, and as you said, we need to do some work on our end to make sure on the country level we've got the support. So I do see a hand up of Bill Smith. Would you like to take the floor?
Just for a minute, a quick question to Claudia. Claudia, I understand that there's no roadmap in place at this time. The two co-facilitators are basically coming together. What would you expect once the roadmap is there? What would you expect from civil society? You mentioned going back to your governments, but will there be a consistent message that civil society will be entertaining from multiple countries? Would that be of help to you?
I think civil society needs to get prepared, if possible, to speak with 1, 2, or 3 voices, not too many, and to have a concrete ask of the co-facilitators. So in this regard, I think it is good if, Garup already wrote a letter to them and asked or told them that they are happy to support them. So if we hear exactly, where these co-facilitators are and what kind of is needed from their end, I guess then it is very critical that civil society organizations also get coordinated with their messaging and ask for the same things. So yes, thank you for the question, Bill. I think from our side, we also need to think a little bit more into the future, what might be the next steps, and get prepared so we can, start preparing ourselves right now and then have already something which we can share with them. Otherwise, it might be a little bit late, because I guess that they will be late regularly in their ask and in their ask for support. But on the other hand, we do have a lot of information already here. We have fantastic written papers. And as I don't really know, what kind of ask they are coming, but getting prepared and getting coordinated between civil society organizations and HRIs is the right thing to do.
Good. Thank you.
Jack Kupferman, I imagine you have another question. I see your hand up.
Yes, not so much a question as an observation. What we're focusing on is the procedural and the process, particularly for the open-ended working group. But Garup has been really effective in mobilizing advocates and working towards governments. That is perhaps an even more important goal, or whatever you want to call it, than the process of the open-ended working group, because the more countries and the more individuals that start yelling, saying we want a convention or we want a better support of the human rights of older people, will result in the open-ended working group being even more effective. So that might be an ask of the co-facilitators. How do we amplify that voice, and how do we encourage not only people in Brazil and Portugal, but throughout many nations to do that? So that's just an observation. Thank you.
May I add something to this, Sandra?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Jack, also for adding this to the conversation. And what we saw quite clearly, that we are missing the voices of Africa. So we are still missing African states. So if you have good ideas how to get more African states involved in this conversation and to address them, I think it's really critical. I'm very happy to say that we are lucky that we got now Nigeria in the bureau again, but we are still missing African states to be part of the conversation. So if you have good ideas how we can get them more involved, I think this would be also a very good support of the co-facilitators, to give them, some member states who are interested, or link them with them, or, come up with some, let's say, conferences or ideas how to get them involved in New York. I don't know, everything is possible, because nowadays we also meet virtually. Let's think this through, but I think also a couple of Asian states are missing, but mostly we really have a blank in the African part.
You
So
know,
I think this also needs to be added to the voice.
Claudia, just for those of us who are not familiar with the composition of the open-ended working group, can you, without going through every country name, can you give us a little flavor of that? And has that been stable over the years? How many are there? Any insights to help those of us who are not intimately involved?
So how much time do we have? No, let me start, as this is a UN process, we need to have member states from all the different regions. And let's make it just easy. We do have not many member states from the African group who are involved. So because the open-ended working group is a governmental state-driven process, even though civil society and NHRIs are involved, but it is a state-driven process. As it was said a couple of times, Argentina is chair. We do have now members in the Bureau from Canada, from the western part. We still have the Philippines from Asia, and we do have Slovakia for the east-western part. And we now got Nigeria back to the Bureau because we were missing an African state for many years. So this is already, the Bureau, but very vocal in the open-ended working group are member states from the Inter-American system, so from Latin America, mostly, not from the Caribbean as much. But those are also the states or the group of states which already do have an Inter-American Convention, which means a regional human rights convention on the rights of all the persons. So they already do have their own regional framework, but they are very strong and very vocal. We do have the Western states. Most of them say that they want to strengthen the human rights of all the persons, but they are not in favor of the convention. Just to make things a little bit easy to understand, some say, yes, we want the convention, others say, never, ever. So let's say it like this, I think everybody in the Western countries would like to strengthen the human rights of all the persons, but without a convention, if possible. So if they're coming up with what they sometimes say a smart solution, they would be very happy. Asia, Pacific, there are not many member states who are really vocal to speak about the convention. Most of them are, active in the open-ended working group. Some are in favor of the convention and some are not. But the African group regularly speaks with one voice, and they didn't speak with one voice at the last open-ended working group, and did not speak up for strengthening the human rights of all the persons and in favor of a convention. And we are really missing active member states, for example, also in the core group, which was mentioned before. There are member states from all other groups, but not from the African part. So this is why I'm saying, if we want to get the convention at the end of the day, we need to get a couple of African member states. Thank you, Frank. Check for adding the African protocol, but it's still not working. They do have an African protocol on the rights of all the people. Sorry, but there are still not enough ratifications, so it's not in progress. It's not working now. But there would be a possibility for them to get a regional binding instrument. If we think it through, once again, Europe could also add something if they would be willing in the Council of Europe, which is broader than the European Union. But for Asia Pacific, there is no regional concept. So they would never have a chance to get their regional human rights convention. So that's it more or less in a nutshell.
Thank you. I do see a hand up from Tutu Musa Diallo, and I wonder if you'd like to ask your question.
Yes, so good morning again, everyone. I appreciate what you're doing. I just want I agree with Claudia was saying and Jack and other people. I think if we want to be inclusive, we need to really begin with inclusivity and send letter to every member state. That's my opinion. So that way, nobody will say we never receive anything. That's all I want to say. And I'm from Mali. I like to participate. So anything I can do, please contact me at Grace Leadership Foundation, Inc. at gmail.com. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My question's a little different. I'm always interested in getting younger people involved in what we do, particularly since they seem to have such a powerful block in the UN. Do you have any thoughts on how we intersect with the youth offices at the UN or civil society, and what's the message?
I think it's an easy one, to be honest, because they're the next generation of older persons as well. So, you know, just get them to acknowledge the life cycle in the end. So if we get the human rights for older people strengthened, it's also, you know, for their future. I think that this would be, from my perspective, an easy one if we take the life cycle approach in a very supportive way.
Thank you. All right, Jack, another question.
Again, back to Claudia, it is true that it seems as though it's an easy lift to involve younger people on this issue. And over the course of years, the youth caucuses have been supportive of the rights of older people. And that was relatively easy. And that, frankly, it was oftentimes easier than dealing with the caucuses for on gender and women. However, that has not resulted in long-term support from younger people and youth. On an individual basis, we look at amongst us here. How many younger people are on this call? And this is what the problem is. Another issue that I had seen over the course of years at the definition of intergenerational at the UN is not about younger people and older people working together. It's about future generations, not people who currently are alive. And the issue of future generations is considered to be intergenerational, which means that older people who are currently alive are not important to the issue of intergenerational. These are just some of the issues that have confronted the advocacy for human rights for older people with regard to alliances with younger people. That's my 7 cents.
But in this regard, I would like to challenge you, Jack, because we also know that there is the Summit of the Future and there is one part on future generation. And I would love you to reach out to the co-facilitators for this part of the Summit of the Future to get all the persons involved, because from my perspective, even though they might not be on the world today, they also grew older and they might be lucky, and all of them might be 100 plus. So even though they might not have fought it through, they need to be involved there. And as far as I know, the co-facilitators are Jamaica and the Netherlands, and I'm really looking forward to hear how they responded if you approach them.
Okay. All right, you know, let's figure out how to do that.
Yeah, good. I'm interested too, Jack. So we'll have to work on that. Cynthia, I'll turn to you since you're our chair.
Thanks. I was just going to say, apropos of what Jack just raised, a very important issue is the fact that this year is the 75th anniversary of the Universal Declaration on Human Rights. And we've been working with them on the planning for our International Day of Older Persons, which is always October 1st, but this year that's a Sunday. Our committee will be observing it in New York at the UN on October 2nd. And the overarching theme is on protecting the human rights of older persons, and particularly focused on an intergenerational approach. So stay tuned on that. And anyone who has ideas for our chair and co-chair, Chris Hanway and Ariana Eleze, for this year's event here in New York, please let us know. But it's very timely that you would raise that, and it certainly ties into what's being planned. And I think it is a challenge. So thank you.
Thanks, Cynthia. Francis, you have your hand raised.
Yes, on the Summit of the Future, just to say that the Stakeholder Group on Aging, of which the NGO Committee on Aging is a member, the Stakeholder Group on Aging, which is part of the 21 major groups and other stakeholders, is following the preparations for the Summit of the Future, as well as in addition to the high-level political forum in July and the SDG Summit in September. And efforts have been made to speak whenever it's possible on the inclusion of older persons in discussions of the Summit of the Future. And I also want to say that the group of Friends of Older Persons, which is chaired by Chile at the moment, they are also working very hard on the preparations leading up to the Summit of the Future to make sure that older persons' issues are included. The Summit of the Future is going to take place in 2024. So we have a little bit of time, but I just want to say there are people working on it, but I think members of NGO committees on aging and GARB obviously include that in what you're doing as well. And for all the NGOs that have ECOSOC status, please attend meetings, whether it's the functional commissions of ECOSOC, meaning Commission on the Status of Women, Commission on Population and Development, Statistical Commission, anything that deals with economic and social issues at the UN. Use your ECOSOC status to bring attention to older persons. And I do urge all of you who represent organizations with ECOSOC status that you need to attend meetings at the UN and take the opportunity that is offered to NGOs to speak up. The NGO Committee on Aging is here to facilitate the participation of our members by drawing attention to what is taking place. Our website highlights the various intergovernmental bodies where you can participate in, and we list key documents that are which are of interest to us and where we can make interventions. So please do that. We don't often see NGOs, members of the NGO Committee on Aging at many of the meetings. So I do, now that COVID is quote over and the UN is actually opening up, and most meetings, if not all, are now in person. So it's time to use your passes and get back into the UN complex and start attending meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Francis. NGO Committee on Aging, we talk about infiltrating the side events of the Commission on the Status of Women and other places where older women or older persons' issues are never addressed. And it appears from this discussion that civil society needs to get out more than we have been, and trying to mobilize not just a few of us, but as many of us as possible to make an impact yet I still respect what you said, Claudia, about not too many voices. And that's why I think the NGO committees in Geneva, Vienna, and New York are good focal points, as well as GARB. So we can come united and really make an impact. And I don't know, I think this has been very inspiring for us. I appreciate very much the background you gave. So many of you were attending, so you're knee deep in this, and others are here for information purposes. But I like the idea of a baby step that is actually a giant step. So with that, unless there are other questions, I'll turn it back to our chair for closing remarks. Thank you again, Claudia, and everyone. And Cynthia, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for this incredible opportunity for us all to have this exchange, interchange, and it's really exciting. And a special thanks to Claudia Mahler. You've just, you're a terrific leader, and we really appreciate you. And I especially appreciated you saying that we all need to be focused nationally. And so, however, we here in New York NGO, we have the unique opportunity, as Francis has said, to meet and interact with with the member states here. And so, but it doesn't take the place of being in touch with your own people in capital and putting the pressure on there. So I really appreciate all of you and for our exchange today. So thank you of giving your time, and particularly to Claudia, you're 6 hours ahead of us. So thank you for staying on with us this evening for you. Thank you all. Have a great day, and mark your calendars for June 8th, our next, we will have a program monthly meeting and our election of officers and a program on June 8th. Stay tuned. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Sandy?
Yes.
Oh, that was great. I thought it was so good. We had all these this wonderful exchange with everyone. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I see that Paulette has stayed on. Hello, Paulette. You're muted, Paulette. Unmute. You're still. Okay, let me try and unmute you, Paulette. Let me see if I can do it. Oh, yeah.
Okay,
There you are. How are you, Paulette?
I'm good. And you?
Oh, very well. You
Yeah.
came in, you were in a little late to the meeting. I didn't remember what time you got on, but.
A little bit, maybe 5 or 7 minutes late.
Oh, that wasn't
Because of
much. I was so
technical
busy
problem.
speaking, so I wasn't sure. Oh, but
Yeah.
anyway, it's always lovely to see you.
Thank you, man. Thank you.
Oh, good. Is everything well with you?
Yeah, we're trying.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, thanks
We
for
have
joining.
been, the meeting was so inspiring.
Well, thank you. Sandy did a great job of organizing it. It was great.
Yeah, it was great.
It's an easy discussion because there's so much interest and so many people.
Congratulations, Sandra. It was so inspiring.
Well, I think it's all of you. It's, you know, obviously we had a wonderful speaker and we have people who care, and that's the important thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
thank you for attending.
Thank you, Sandra.
And Bridget Penhale, I see. Are you still with us, Bridget?
Okay, bye-bye. See you
Bye,
next.
Paulette. Okay. I see Valerie. Valerie. Oh, where are you, Valerie?
I got lost.
You know, I think you have two two
Yeah.
files up. We hear echoes.
Yeah, I think it's because she has her phone on. Bridget, are you still there? Bridget Penhale?
We'll say goodbye because
Otherwise, okay, I'll just. You okay, Valerie?
Yes, I'm fine.
Okay, all right, well, I'm gonna end the call. I gotta get to a reception later today, so I'm gonna take the train in. Take care.
Okay.
I
Bye.
Where's the board meeting? Where is the board meeting?
When?
Where?
It's a virtual meeting.
Oh, okay.
Bye.
Bye.
Hi, Peter.
Hi, Cynthia. I'm so sorry. Is it over?
Oh, it's all over. I just closed it out. But I'd stayed on a few minutes talking to somebody from Africa and whatever. And so I thought, and I saw you and I thought, oh, I'm going to admit him and say hi.
I'm glad you did. We were hosting a big event here on the impact of racial discrimination over time on aging. And it was, our team was hosting it downstairs, and I had to be there.
Oh, of course.
And it was fantastic, but I was really sorry to miss this. And I thought, well, maybe it'll go over and I'll just jump in. I just got back to my office.
Okay, well, anyway,
How'd it
Claudia
go?
Mahler was absolutely fabulous. She was just great.
Oh.
So anyway, yeah.
It said there was a recording. Is it?
Yeah, in fact,
shared.
yeah, I started recording it just after I introduced Claudia. So, and she's going to send me her slides. So as soon
Okay.
as I get download the recording
Okay.
and
I'll check it out.
and we'll put it on our website, but I'll try to remember to send it to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much, Cynthia. I'm really sorry to have had this conflict.
It was a great exchange.
Didn't you originally send it out as things?
I think 58 total people participate, which was wonderful.
That's great.
And great exchange and lots of questions and interaction. And it was really good. And I tell you, Claudia, my takeaway from Claudia was it's important to focus at the national level now.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay.
we've got Portugal and Brazil, but it's really important at the national level that we get everybody to, if they're on board, stay on board. If they're not on board, get them on board. And
okay, that's helpful.
Yeah.
Well, I'm very eager to stay engaged. It was just a terrible conflict. I think originally your invitation said it was on Wednesday, which I was happy about, but I didn't have a conflict then.
Yeah, it was, the original one said Tuesday, May 4th, and that created all kinds of confusion. So we got that straightened out. So at least we got everybody on board today. But the other thing I just wanted, since I have you, I wanted to share with you, you know, this being the Universal Declaration of Human Rights 75th anniversary,
right.
The International Day of Older Persons this year will use that as sort of the overarching.
Oh, good.
Yeah. And in New York, our chair and co-chair have just come up with a theme which really promotes intergenerational, because I really think it's important. You know, UN tends, as one of our people said, and I totally concur, when UN talks intergenerational, they think of youth, you know, youth of today, or those yet not born who will become old someday. And forget that we're all part of this global life course, population aging, you know, from day one. So
that's right.
So we really, you know,
oh, good. Well,
always supports us, and I'm sure you will again.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, we are. In fact, it was on my list to talk to Erica this week about the emerging plans, because it's about that time when
That's right.
Was she able to make the call? Was she able to make this call that you just had? Was she
Yeah,
on it?
but she
Oh,
had
good.
to get off for a meeting at 2, so she was on from 1 to 2, so she
Okay.
didn't miss much.
Well, look, if you send out a recording, I'll watch it. I'm sorry to have
Okay.
missed.
All righty.
Take care, Cynthia. Good to see you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.